Welcome everybody to today's College Ready Writers Program webinar. We're very happy to be here, and the first thing that you can do for us is sign in with the questions and let us know that you're here. The question the question tool is on the left-hand side. If you move your cursor to the left of the screen, there'll be a light blue Q&A button. And you can go ahead and say, I'm here. We're very glad to have you here. And this webinar is called Getting Started, Making an Instructional Plan with CRWP Tools and Resources. And tonight we're talking with Rachel Baer from the National Writing Project, Beth Rimer from the Ohio Writing Project, Hayley Hill from South Mississippi Writing Project, who has just disappeared and I'm sure will return, and Jameka Thomas from the Red Mountain Writing Project. And if you all could just say hello, everybody will know who you are.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing?
Yeah, glad you're here. So if you're listening to us live, please use the Q&A function. Please don't +1 any of the comments. We learned that the comments are ordered by the number of +1s they get. And so it makes it very difficult to find out the most recent question. We hope you don't have too many questions because we hope that we're clear, but feel free to ask what you need to know, and we'll try to get to it. We may delay answering the questions till the end depending on time. For colleagues who could not attend this webinar live, it'll be posted in the CRWP NWP G+ community that people are belonging to and posting, and any other materials will be posted there as well. And if you're not live, if your colleagues aren't here, you can tell them that they can still view the Q&A from the show by clicking on the little 9-square box in the upper right-hand corner of the screen once you play the webinar and select Q&A. So what's this webinar about? The context for what it's about is how to start the year and put CRWP materials and tasks into an already full curriculum. School reform in the last 20 years has filled up the curriculum with requirements, leaving little time for new practices or new sets of assignments like CRWP. Sometimes there's even administrative pressure to be on the same page. Sometimes there's scripted or mandated curricula. But even with less strict curricula, teachers already have their year full. You know, all the TCs in the Advanced Institute, they have a year. They've been teaching already. So how is it that we decide and gracefully integrate new practices into existing curriculum? So to help us figure out how to start with that process, I'm going to hand it off to Beth Rimer and Hayley Hill, both of whom have thought deeply about that and have some expertise and experience in this area. So take it away, Beth and Hayley.
Thanks, Tom. So, Tom, I wanted to start thinking about this idea with your idea of just starting the year. Because I think it's really interesting to think about, there's so many ways to get started in a year that we want to set our classroom up in certain ways. We have rules, we have expectations, and I've really been thinking a lot about what the goal of the CRWP is, or just this idea of the kinds of students and thinkers and readers and writers we want to come out of our classroom. And it started making me think, what if you just start your year with argument, or this idea of engaging our students right from the start, with not with icebreakers or not with just rules, but about the world and the conversations and what they have to say. So I think one way to think about planning the CRWP work and getting started is literally just starting the year. Because middle school and high school students, right, they're like right at that age where they are ready to do something more, right? They're like so excited about they're interested in the world around them. They are wondering about the conversations they see on TV. They're wondering about why are people saying what they're saying, and they're starting to realize that just because they hear something around the dinner table doesn't mean they have to think that way, and they really want to know more. And this idea of leveraging that and capitalizing on that from the start is a great way to start the CRWP, but also get to know our students. And then so here's what I was thinking about that. If we started with like our writer's notebooks, and we had them looking at issues on the headlines and looking at the way people were talking in the world, we would, one, get to know them in a way we would never get to know them just by them telling us what they did over summer. Two, we would be able to model right away the kinds of conversations that people can have in civil ways, which unfortunately maybe they don't always see all the time right now. And so we could model, how do you have a claim? How do you come to an opinion on something? What's your evidence? What do other people believe? How do you weigh those things? So we could actually model from the way things are from the start and get to know them. And then I was thinking about the rest of the question. I know, Hayley, you're going to pick up on kind of how to spread this throughout the year, but I was thinking, if we used our notebook and we were writing right away and having discussions and reading, those patterns, once that pattern is established, we would be able to use that all year long, right? They'd always be able to pick up their notebook and practice the skill of responding to somebody else's words, or practice the skill of watching a news video, and then what in it would you pull out and respond to, or practice the skill of using sentence frames or choosing the right evidence for a claim. And once that pattern's established through small notebook and then mini unit, and then they're ready to make longer arguments. And it seems like that whole kind of starting piece is one of the ways that we want to plan to create this culture of argument so we can use it all year long. Does that make sense?
It's perfect.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that.
I was going to pick off of something you said, like kids may not always see in other classes positive academic conversations going on, or they may not know how to make a good argument, whether out loud or in writing. And I know as a teacher who's been with CRWP from the start, it's so important, like you said, to think of jumping into this from the beginning. And for me, I think the best advice I could give another teacher is it's so important, like you said, to create that culture of argument, and a positive culture of argument. And sometimes that means not just modeling for the students, but really being intentional about scaffolding for them, like, providing sentence starters about how to talk back and forth about really hard topics, or starting them off with writing their thoughts and practicing speaking back and forth. It might take baby steps, because I know at first for me that was kind of scary, like letting my kids jump into sometimes really deep waters. And it helped to realize that sometimes modeling wasn't going to be enough. I had to take an extra step, and that's okay. It's going to take baby steps. And then the other thing that was scary for me as a teacher was thinking, how am I going to do all this plus all the other stuff that I've got to do? And so it helps if you start from the beginning and you have this community of learners and you get to know your students. But it doesn't have to be a separate thing that's, okay, now we have 30 minutes for a College Ready Writers program in my classroom. It's built into everything else that you do. Creating a culture of argument means that it's interwoven into everything else. Already in most of our standards, we have to teach students how to evaluate arguments, how to write arguments. So it shouldn't really be something extra. I know that as an English teacher, we love Like, what am I going to do about my literature? I don't want to give that up. And it doesn't have to be something that you give up. It can be interwoven seamlessly. And like what you were saying with the current events, that's so perfect. We want our students to be knowledgeable about the world, not only about things that were written 50 years ago, but about things that are going on in their world now. And using argument as a way to bridge those things is perfect. Like, for example, in my class, we had we were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, but it was at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so that was a great opportunity to use argument to bridge the themes that we were studying in the literature, to give my students a voice with what was going on in the world, and so they can see how all of that applies to current events.
So Hayley, I love that idea of, 'cause you said lots of things that I love, but two of the in terms of this idea of how do we plan this work instructionally, I heard you talk about topics to plan around ideas and issues, and then I also heard you say that idea about skills, the kinds of skills we want our students to know all the time. And this argument definitely helps when we're planning to think about what are the skills we want readers and writers to be able to do. We want them to know what kinds of questions to ask next once they know something else and not wait for us. We want them to see what other people might think, not just wait for us to tell them. I mean, all those things that you kind of said in the skills can happen within the work we already do, and it's not foreign. This is the work we want to do.
Exactly.
So I think, yeah.
Exactly. It was hard for me as a teacher to realize that this wasn't extra work, like that this was helping my students reach the goals that I already wanted them to achieve. And as I slowly came to see that, I didn't see the College Ready Writers program as more work for me. I saw it as an easier way to achieve the goals that I was already trying to reach with my students.
So I think that what you're saying right there is actually a perfect segue into where Jameka and Rachel were going to go, right? This idea that it can be seamlessly threaded throughout, especially if we think about what kind of skills we're trying to work with argument, what kind of topics, and if we can plan it throughout and not just have it be this big old chunk of thing that happens at the end of the year, then it becomes who our classroom is and who our students can be together. So I think this is where we hand it off to Jameka and Rachel to talk about planning tools. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
That is right, Beth. And I know Beth has to jump off because she's going to an award ceremony for her daughter. So we're going to let her do that and say thank you so much, Beth, for being here. And you can go ahead and sign off and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. So Jameka and I are going to talk specifically about some planning tools that we've created to assist teachers in doing just the exact things that Beth and Hayley were talking about. And we have a few different tools, but just wanted to talk first about this whole big idea of planning and what planning looks like for the College Ready Writers program, and you know, what kind of supports we can give to people and some things that teachers want to think about. And also we want to say that, you know, when we think about instructional planning for CRWP, the approach we encourage people to take is really sort of very flexible and relies heavily on the formative assessment tools that we have in CRWP, and is organized very much around responding to what teachers observe with students and what they see in student work over the course of the year. So what we say is, you know, you start by making an initial plan, an instructional plan that looks at how to integrate the four cycles of writing into a curriculum plan, but also thinking about ways to create a culture of argument, to do routine argument writing, and then thinking about more longer extended revised pieces. But then that initial plan is, and really that initial plan is actually very much dependent upon where a teacher thinks his or her students will be coming from as far as the argument skills that they enter with. And so the plan often begins with, okay, this is a place where I think my students are ready, that they can begin. And then a teacher would teach a cycle of writing and have an idea of maybe the other cycles of writing, but we really want them to then, okay, after I've taught a cycle of writing, look at the student writing with the formative assessment tools that we have, and then adjust that plan moving forward. So it's really thinking specifically about the skills that students have. So for example, a teacher might teach the connecting evidence to claims mini unit and feel like that's the a great entry point, and then look at that connecting evidence to claims student writing and see, okay, students really have mastered this skill of connecting evidence to claims. The student writing demonstrates that, and so it would make sense as a next instructional step to go to the ranking evidence mini unit, because that's a logical step in the sequence. But a teacher might also notice that there's some kind of, something that the students need more help with, or that they need to revisit, and maybe they need more work with connecting evidence to claims, and so they could go back and reteach the mini unit with a different text set, or use some different approaches, or some routine argument skills to help them really master that before they move on to the next one. So the planning should be, as always, very flexible, and depends, might change based on what they see in student writing and what instructional next steps need to be. So having said that, we want to look at 3 planning tools that help teachers start that initial planning to look at what the scope of the year may look like that can be adjusted later as they see. And so we've actually created 3 different planning tools for different purposes. And what we're going to do is look briefly at each one. And then Jameka and I will talk a little bit about what the thinking was behind it and the differences among them, because this is another way we want to be flexible and receptive to teachers' needs, and that is providing different tools that they can select based on their context, or that they can use or adapt, or even that they could do something else entirely. But this gives them some examples of what it might look like. So I'm going to let Jameka. Yes?
Where are these tools located?
Great question. These tools are located on the website, on our CRWP website, which I will link in the Q&A for anybody who doesn't have it. And let me go ahead and screen share really quickly, because I was going to show where they are on the website. So can you see the website now, Tom?
Yep.
Okay, so on the College Ready Writers Program website, under one of the tabs, there is one right over here that's called Planning Tools. So once you click there, you can see the 3 different planning tools. You can, have them pop out as a Google Doc and then download any of the tools, whichever of the 3 you would want to use, or that the teachers want to select from. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Jameka, and I'll jump in, Jameka, if there's anything that I want to add. But Jameka is going to talk about, because we work together to create some of these tools, and she's going to talk about the thinking behind them and some of the principles that we were considering and some key differences among them. So I'm going to go ahead and project the PowerPoint so that we can see the first one. And go ahead, Jameka.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. When discussing or planning the tools that will be needed for a CRWP, we thought about how there are different teachers who are in different situations, and so we wanted to come up with different types of planning tools that would help. Our first planning tool is a year in view, but it's by month. It starts from June to June, and it goes to the following June. But in the first planning tool, we have specific places for different CRWP tools and resources. You can see that the Using Sources tool is in the January, December time. You also have the routine writing, argument writing. You also have the extended. And so with the first planning tool, it's more of a rigid, do this at this point, and then you can go into the next phase and the next phase, including those 4 cycles of writing. The next planning tool, we thought about teachers who look at...
Hey, Jameka, hang on. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to add one quick thing to that. You can see, I just wanted to mention the color coding of this first planning tool, and how you can see, the different elements of the program and how they move across. So like the pink is where teachers would would put in what they're experiencing in the Advanced Institute. The purple is where they're planning for argument writing, mini units revision, and then the blue and green are, the blue is for the Using Sources tool, and then the green is for districts or state curriculum requirements. And so where we have those separated, you know, and then teachers think about over the course of the year where they're going to plan for each one. I will mention too, for this one, it's very big, and so it would, you know, you'd want to print is probably on legal paper or have teachers do that so that they can see the whole thing. So go ahead now then, Jameka, we'll move on to the next one.
All right. The next one that we created was a year in view, but by semester. Sometimes with teachers, you know what you will want to teach in your first semester and what you will want to teach in the second semester. But we also included standards and a place to put your pacing guide or your curriculum guide, and that really just helps with the alignment. Just as Beth and Hayley talked about earlier, is the integration of CRWP and what you're already doing. And so with this tool, it has specific places where you can put what you are already doing with your curriculum guide or your pacing guide. The third tool, Rachel, do you have anything you want to add with that?
Just really quick, another thing that we were thinking about as we designed this is, you can see this is more of a general planning tool where teachers are getting just like basic ideas about what they'll do. And another thing that we also thought about is the different, you know, some people have quarters, some people have trimesters. So there's different ways that the things are organized, and so that's why we just went with a semester 1, semester 2, so they can think in general about where things might fit. So thanks, Jameka. Here's the third one.
Okay. And then the last one is a year in view by month again, but it starts from August to May, and it goes to May. Here you have more of where the teachers can customize, and you can look at the different resources and the different tools that we're asking you to use and where you can put them month by month. And with this one is more of for those teachers who might have more confidence in what and how they want to plan, and so they can use this tool in order to do that.
Yeah, and I think you can see here too, like Jameka said, this is month by month. The boxes are smaller, and so it's also going to give just a general view of what's going to happen in each one of these months. But it helps them see, I think this one helps them see sort of the balance of things and the cycle moving across. So like I said, this is, you know, it's really designed for teachers to pick what works for their context, or to use this whole idea to create their own planning tool as something that's going to make sense. Like if I am on a trimester, maybe I want to create one that looks a lot like, you know, this one, but it has 3 semesters on it or something. So it just gives them an idea of what the tool planning might look like. And again, we really want to emphasize that the idea is that for it to be flexible, for teachers to make their plan, and then as they look at student work to adjust that plan as needed. Tom, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just I was going to reiterate what you just said, that you know, you could make a plan and change it. You know, as the year unfolds, it's likely that teachers will make adjustment to their plan. So it isn't a new rigid thing that you have to do. They're all designed just to be helpful.
Yes. So now we're actually going to move back to Hayley, and we'll hear some more from Jameka, because the two of them are going to talk about really specifically how to plan. And so when we're thinking about when you have an existing curriculum and you sit down and think about integrating CRWP materials and the formative assessment tools, what are the things, what's the approach that you take? And Hayley will be able to talk very specifically about her classroom and what she's done, and this whole, how she's dealt with this whole idea of flexibility. And Jameka is actually going to talk about, from an administrator's perspective, strategies for teachers to talk with their administrators as they're thinking about, you know, helping them understand what this looks like and integrating CRWP materials into their curriculum. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off first to Hayley, and then we'll also hear from Jameka. So Hayley, will you talk to us about how you've done this kind of work, planning on integrating CRWP materials into your curriculum?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Um, for me, the biggest obstacle was trying to fit it into the literature that I was already expected to teach. At my school, there's this idea that you have to teach a certain number of extended texts a year. So for me, the easiest thing to do was to think thematically. And so I sat down, I looked at what literature I was going to be teaching, and I thought, what argumentative topics can I draw from this? Um, what connections can I make to what's going on in the real world? Because it didn't always end up having to be by topic or thematically with the literature that I was reading. It also sometimes just turned out that there was great stuff going on in the world, topics that the kids cared about or didn't know a lot about that made great argument topics. So for me, it was like you were talking about being flexible. It was a certain amount of planning on the front end. What are some arguments that I know that I could run with? But then also being flexible with what's happening around me, integrating that into the classroom, and when I could, integrating it in with also the literature that we were reading. But one thing I definitely want to encourage people to think about is to think about who your students are as you get to know them over the course of the year. Be flexible enough to realize what your students are interested in, what sort of people they are, or what sort of knowledge they lack. Some of the best moments as I planned all of my argument cycles happened when I would go in with a really great idea, like my kids are really going to be excited about this argument cycle, they're really going to get into it, and then it might not work out like I thought it would, and that led to really cool teachable moments. For example, I planned this small argument unit on what was going on in Hawaii with the lava flows, ruining homes. It was inching towards everybody, and I thought that was going to be a really big hit. It kind of thematically linked to what was going on in a piece of literature that we were reading, and it turns out the kids did not connect to it at all, so I had to be flexible. It turns out that I could link that, and a student actually was like, oh, this is sort of like in Katrina when we lost all of our home. And that's when it came alive for them. I had to sometimes build bridges for them with what we were studying in our argument units, and that actually led to other opportunities for research and argument as they were learning more about the lava flows and the solutions that people sought. That then they were able to learn more about what happened in Katrina and the solutions that were sought to deal with that problem. And then that led to other opportunities for argument and discussion. So it's a good mix as you think about the year of being structured, but also being open to those teachable opportunities and what's going on in the world.
Hayley, would you maybe talk a little bit about the adjusting an instructional plan based on looking at student writing? So what were your experiences like when you used like the Using Sources tool to look at student writing and then think about instructional next steps?
The funny thing is, when you sit down and you look at student writing, you might think that, oh, my kids are doing a really great job making claims, or they are choosing the most relevant best evidence. I know they are. And then when you look at student writing and you start seeing the patterns, wow, I see a weakness here. The great thing there was with the CRWP program, or the CRWP, is that once you start seeing like the patterns of weakness and you realize, okay, I need to step back and adjust some of my teaching, I had options. I had to be flexible first and foremost, but I had options because you guys had a lot already available to us, like mini lessons that we could teach. But then the cool thing is, like, as you look at the writing and you see, wow, I must have missed something in my teaching, and then you go back and you make adjustments, you reteach things, and that gives you an opportunity to look into a new topic altogether. They're not only learning more about whatever it is you're reading about, but you can definitely see the growth in those skills. Over time, it was amazing how I saw my kids making much more nuanced moves in their writing. going from, wow, they can make a claim, to teaching and reteaching and tweaking based on the using sources tools to, oh, they could add much more in-depth commentary to their evidence that they chose here, or this is an opportunity to authorize. It was amazing to see them go from the basics to the more nuanced moves and argument writing based on the using sources tool.
That's great. Thank you for that. And I also really appreciate what you said about the fact that you have choices. So when you sit down and you look at student writing, it's not like the program itself will say, okay, you have to teach this min-unit, then this min-unit, and this min-unit, but actually that you can look and say, okay, where are opportunities for students to improve their writing, and now how can I look at all of the things that are available and pick the thing that makes the most sense for my students right now, and that there are multiple options for doing that.
It's really great because it's really not meant to tell you how to do things step by step like a script. You get to make choices based on who your students are and where they are, and you know, that's a formula that can't be messed up.
That's great. Thank you so much, Hayley. And so now I wanted to turn to Jameka, because what we know is that teachers are going to have conversations really about how they're adjusting their curriculum and how they're integrating these tools. And Jameka offers us the really great administrator perspective and thinking about how a teacher might have a conversation with their administrator about integrating these materials. So Jameka, would you go ahead and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. As an assistant principal in a middle school, and as an administrator, there are certain points that probably would help to convince, as when you're having that conversation with them, of the benefits of CRWP. As we know, a lot of administrators are very bottom line. Unfortunately, many of them want to hear how CRWP will help with test scores. So this will be a great time to discuss critical thinking that is involved with writing and how strengthening critical thinking process through the CRWP will help across content and grade levels. And we as teachers and educators with NWP, we know how important the writing process is and how important that critical thinking process is. But a lot of times those who are not of our same mindset really do not see writing in that way. And so this will be a really great time to show how critical thinking is really the root of the writing process. Another point to include is something that we have been really talking about the whole time, is that CRWP will support the state standards that should be taught in the classroom. It isn't something else that teachers will be doing. It can be incorporated in what teachers are already teaching. And since the CRWP is incorporated in the curriculum or pacing guide, it still gives the teachers the ability to sustain the state and local mandated initiatives. So a lot of times teachers would think, or administrators would think, well, this is just something else to do. When are you going to find time to do this? We need to make sure that you're doing this initiative. The state wants us to do this, or the district wants us to do this. How will you make time for this type of program? And so just aligning what you are doing using our planning tools, especially the ones with the curriculum guide, the curriculum alignment, will help to demonstrate and give the evidence that this is just a layer of what the teachers will be doing, not the entire program, and that's it. And so I think showing that integration will be the biggest benefit in administrators signing off with their teachers using CRWP in their classroom.
Great, thank you, Jameka. That perspective is really helpful, and to think about, really where the administrators are coming from and how to help them see that this is actually in line with their goals and the goals for the school and the goals for their students. Yeah, absolutely. So, so I'm going to go ahead and pass things back to Tom, so he can say, any last words that he wants to say to wrap things up. But also, I think we're going to open it up to Q&A in case people have questions. So, passing on off to you, Tom.
So yeah, write your questions up there, and we would be happy to respond to all of them. One thing that I think came up in this concern over how to fit CRWP in a curriculum is the question of literature, and many secondary schools have a literature-based curriculum that really structures the whole year. And what we found out in the program so far is that one really interesting thing to do would be to identify themes in the literature that are important, that you want to get to when you study the literature. And before you read the literature, do a nonfiction text set around those themes. So people found that very successful, and they found that it really enriched the literary study as well. So I thought that was one thing I would pass on, and I think it's something like what Southern Mississippi did. Is that right, Hayley? She's nodding.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay.
Our site director Robin really during the summer sat down with us and helped us think through. Like, we brought our books in that we were going to teach, and we put together text sets, informational text sets, to enrich our reading of the novels.
Right. So I think that's one way that you know, it's not an extra thing; it's an enrichment of an existing curriculum. So I thought that was a very smart way to go about it. So I thank you to. If anyone has a question, now would be the time to ask it, and we'll wait a few minutes. But
Tom,
then we'll sign off. But Rachel, you can add.
Yeah, I wanted to add another strategy for planning from literature. So there's the thematic approach, but you can also think from a skill perspective. So when you're teaching literature, the skills that you're focusing on in teaching literature often align with the kinds of argumentative skills. So you could find, like, maybe in teaching literature, you want students to support their analysis of a novel with evidence from the text. Well, you can also look for that parallel skill in argumentation, where we're having them think about how to support their claims with evidence from a nonfiction text. So that's another way to pair, from thinking from that perspective.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I totally agree with that. All right, I don't see questions pointing up, so I wanted to thank everybody for listening, and thank our participants for articulating such an interesting approach to CRWP, and then we're going to sign off. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
for having me.
Thank you, Hayley.